Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. Mario Cristobal, the Miami Hurricanes continuing to work their way through spring practice. And as they work their way through spring practice, we keep getting some kind of feedback and some nuggets that I think are really intriguing and really insightful in terms of what this team is going to look like going into 2025. Now, I want to start this real quick with a massive shout out to the 24/7 sports guys, to the On3 guys, to the local beat writers covering this program. They have done a phenomenal job, keeping us informed in terms of what's going on in the early days of spring practice. Appreciate them. Gives us some stuff to talk about. There are some really intriguing takeaways that we've seen over the last couple of days as Miami has started spring practice. We want to talk about a couple of different things. One, what's the new defense look like under this coaching staff, and how is the personnel grasping this new defense? And Wesley Bissaint gave us some really good information on that. We want to talk about some new faces that are standing out for Miami as well. It sounds like there are going to be a lot of new faces on this Miami Hurricanes team that are going to be difference makers for this team in 2025. And I think what excites the Miami fans the most about this is these new faces are coming at the positions that Miami needed to get better at going into 2025. You can't ask for much more than that. Before we get into it, as always, to the Miami Hurricane fans, it continues to be an absolute blast talking this football team. And the amount of engagement and how locked in the Miami Hurricane fans are in terms of what we're talking about on the recruiting trail, what we're talking about in spring practice. There are a lot of college football fans across the country that haven't thought a lick about the football season coming up. That's not the Miami Hurricane fans. Y'all are locked in. Appreciate you guys. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Without further ado, let's get into it. I want to start with something, kind of simple, but I think matters, especially when you're talking about early spring practice before the patch start coming on, and it's the body types. And from what you're hearing coming out of spring practice, this team looks physically different than it has the last couple of years. That matters. And look, I'm not going to get up here and say body types are everything, but they certainly matter. I mean, you look at the best teams in college football, and I'll show you the biggest, strongest, fastest teams. If you got football players that are bigger, stronger, faster than the team you're playing, you immediately put yourself in a position to have a lot of success on Saturdays. This has been a kind of a culmination of the last couple of years in terms of what Miami's done on the recruiting trail, how they've supplemented in the transfer portal. They got a really physically impressive team. They're big, strong, fast football players. And again, that's going to matter for Miami going into 2025. The next talking point I have is the new coaching staff. And I've been really interested to kind of listen to some of the interviews of these players. Say, all right, what does it look like and feel like under new defensive coordinator Corey Heatherman? The most popular response that you have heard, and Corey Heatherman, quite frankly, said this himself in some of his press conferences, that we got to go just play faster and more physical. What went wrong with Miami's defense in the 2024 year? It felt like, especially in the month of November, that Lance Guidry was just throwing a bunch of stuff at the wall and hoping it was going to stick. And it was almost like a little bit of panic from this Miami Hurricanes defense where, hey, we're not playing the way we expected to play. Let's start making some big-time changes. And what you saw was the different personnel groupings, the different blitz packages. It almost was like Lance Guidry made it too complicated to the point that the players on the defensive side of the football, they were playing slow because they were a little bit confused on their responsibility. And I know Miami fans feel this way. How many times did we just see simple pre-snap motion completely rattle this Miami Hurricanes defense as a whole in 2024? It was like an utter panic. It was utter confusion. The thing you're hearing the most from Corey Heatherman and these football players is that we're going to simplify some things, and we're just going to go out and play fast and physical, and that's going to work for Miami. Because you look at some teams, you might need to win off scheme because you don't have the players on defense. This year going into 2025, Miami has a very talented defense. And at the end of the day, you just got to get these guys in the right spots to go make plays. You don't have to overcomplicate things because you got players that can go impact a football game. That's what excites me the most. We know we got a good football team. We're going to simplify it for this group a little bit and let them go play fast, physical, and go make plays. That doesn't mean you don't scheme some things up. And that doesn't mean you try to add some wrinkles into your defense, but it's that line to kind of toe where it's we want to be complicated. We want to kind of throw off offensive line protections and kind of confuse quarterbacks. But what we also want to do is make sure our guys know what they're doing and can go out and play fast and physical. And I think that's kind of what you're hearing from this Miami Hurricanes defense, not only from the coaching staff and Corey Heatherman, but also the players as well. The other note I kind of wanted to note was the position flex that we're seeing. Now, it's most notably with a guy like Chris Ewald, who was a true freshman, who was playing a little nickel, playing a little safety. It probably doesn't matter that much for a guy like Chris Ewald, because I would be surprised if he plays significant reps for Miami as a true freshman, although like we saw OJ Frederick play a lot. I don't think anybody expected him to play a lot in 2024. So it's a possibility. What excites me more is telling me that there's a little bit of a clean slate, and this new defensive coaching staff is going to come in and say, all right, how can we get players in their right spots, and how can we get all our best players on the football field too? Because you got so many good boundary cornerbacks. You only play two. Can you move one to nickel? Can you maybe move another cornerback to safety? That kind of intrigues me as well in terms of Miami getting a little bit creative in terms of how they're using their personnel and how can we get the best football players on the field for us in 2024, 2025. Them doing that with Chris Ewald is telling me they might be doing that with some other players at some point during spring or fall camp. And I think that's an intriguing storyline because we know Miami has the personnel. They got enough good players in the secondary. Now it's figuring out where do they all fit in. And you want to get them all on the football field as well. Players who are standing out, and it's primarily new faces. And let's start with Xavier Lucas. And it's so funny because I feel like Xavier Lucas's commitment flew under the radar in terms of what he brings to Miami. Because what everybody talked about when Xavier Lucas entered the transfer portal and then came to Miami was the ordeal that happened at Wisconsin not letting him enter the portal, not filing his paperwork. That took up all the attention. And nobody talked about how good of a football player this guy is. I mean, and this is not a shot at OJ Frederick because I think OJ Frederick is an absolute dude for Miami. There's a very good chance Xavier Lucas comes in his cornerback one for Miami, and OJ Frederick's on the other side at number 2. He's 6'2", 200 pounds, comfortably runs sub-11 in the 100-meter dash. And so he's got all these physical traits that you love. And then you go back to his true freshman year at Wisconsin, he was exceptional. Now, he didn't play a ton until the end of the year. You take a look at the numbers, 21 targets, only gave up 11 catches, a 50% completion percentage when he was targeted with 0 penalties as a true freshman cornerback. And normally when you see true freshman cornerbacks get out there, and you even saw OJ Frederick struggle at times with this, it's you getting too handsy. You're panicking with the football in the air. You didn't see any of that stuff from Xavier Lucas. He only missed 6% of his tackles. So big, long cornerback that is standing out physically, that has already shown us that he's a good football player. You might be looking at it an All-American, All-ACC caliber guy with Xavier Lucas. And I feel like nobody really talked about him like that because the whole storyline was the ordeal that happened in Madison, Wisconsin. The number 2 guy I want to talk about, and this is a really intriguing one, Dylan Day. We're looking for who's going to step up at safety opposite Zachariah Poyser, right? We know we got one dog safety in Zachariah Poyser. I think the question is who's going to be the other safety. Maybe it's going to be Zaquan Patterson, but I know he's dealing with an injury during spring ball. Dylan Day is fascinating. Dylan Day was not a guy that got a ton of buzz in that 2024 class for Miami because he was listed at 5'11", 165 pounds coming out from the state of Louisiana. He's up to 6'2", 200 plus pounds. He's a guy that has an extensive track and field background. One of the biggest struggles that Miami had with safeties last year is they were just too slow. They couldn't hold up in man coverage. 6'2", 200 pounds track and field background. Dylan Day going into year 2, a guy that flashed on special teams as a true freshman for Miami. We haven't talked about Dylan Day maybe at all for Miami going into the spring practice window. It might be time that we start talking a little bit more about Dylan Day. 2 true freshmen, you have to shout out Hayden Lowe. And Hayden Lowe's a different kind of edge rusher, right? I mean, you go back to Miami's class in 2024, who did they take? Guys like Marquise Lightfoot, guys like Booker Pickett, even a guy like Armando Blunt, who was probably more physically developed than guys like Booker Pickett and Marquise Lightfoot, but he was a reclass guy. So he was a young cat last year as a freshman, should have been a senior in high school. Hayden Lowe's different. And this is not me getting up here and saying Booker Pickett and Marquise Lightfoot aren't going to work out, because I'm very high on Booker Pickett. But we knew it would probably be at least 2 years before he plays. Hayden Lowe's not that guy. He's 6'5", 250-plus pounds. From everything you are hearing, he looks the part. From what I saw from him on the senior year film, he certainly looks the part. You talk about freshmen that can come in and contribute in a meaningful way right away. It sounds like Hayden Lowe is going to be that. And the amount of upside that this defensive line has, and it's such a big storyline because you're hearing great things from Armando Blunt. You're hearing really good things from Justin Scott in terms of what they look like physically. We've talked about this. You talk about Miami, we know they're going to be a good football team. No question about that. No, the question is how good. Can it be a college football playoff team? Can it be a national championship contender? To me, one of the biggest storylines is, what does this defensive line look like? We talked about it a lot. Go back and look at the teams that have either won national championships or have competed for national championships. Back to last year, Ohio State or a team like Texas. 2 years ago, a team like Michigan. A couple of years ago, teams like Georgia. What do all those programs have in common? They had not only good defensive lines, they had elite, dominant defensive lines. Miami's got that chance. Now, in order for Miami to be a dominant defensive line, you're going to need a guy like Hayden Lowe, or you're going to need a guy like Justin Scott, Armando Blunt. But from what we're hearing is those guys are starting to look the part. That, to me, might be the biggest storyline in terms of a good football team and a great football team in 2025 for Miami. Last one, we just continue to hear the buzz. Malachi Toney. I think we'll do a deep dive on Malachi Toney at some point, because you talk about a freshman that I think will have the biggest role within this team. It is probably Malachi Toney. And I give Mario Cristobal a lot of credit, where it's like, hey, we're going to rock with our young wide receivers going into spring camp. We're going to give them an opportunity to show us what they can do. And it sounds like they're doing that. Now, you might see Miami go get a wide receiver in the transfer portal post-spring, but from what we've heard early from guys like Malachi Toney or a guy like JoJo Trader or a guy like Elijah Lofton at tight end, I don't even know if Miami's going to need to grab one, because you're hearing some great things from all of these wide receivers, and I think that was one of the biggest question marks we had. We know Carson Beck and this Miami Hurricanes offense, they're going to be able to run the football. You give Carson Beck a good run game, that's where it starts. Now, do you have good enough pass catches around Carson Beck? That was a question. Low-key starting to get the answers about that early in spring practice. Now, again, for a guy like a freshman Malachi Toney, you want to see him consistently do it for the next month in spring practice. About as good a reports as you can get from Malachi coming out of winter workouts and starting spring practice. We'll close it there. Appreciate you guys rocking with it. Again, all the support means the absolute world. The boys are having a blast talking this program. The amount of support's been amazing. Appreciate you guys, and we'll talk to y'all later.